Hello everyone, let us continue with the introductory chapter of your business research. Okay, so the background of the study basically provides the reader with a general orientation of the research paper and of course its underlying problem. So it communicates to the reader the importance and significance of the study and its contribution, of course, to the development of education, its stakeholders, and, the researcher himself or herself. So in the introductory chapter, this can be actually broken down into sections. So the first section here is the background of the study. So in here, we present the overview of the research and of course a situational analysis that shows the problem in a global, national, regional, and of course local context. So the background of the study should contain a discussion of the following. So what exactly is your research problem? What is your research for? Why are you studying it? Okay, so that is the justification of the problem. Are there personal reasons as to why you are conducting this research? And you should also establish the link between the introduction and the problem. So let's look into one carefully. All right, so the presentation of the problem tells the reader what the problem is all about, and it also indicates what is covered by the study. So it includes a short discussion of the existence of an unsatisfactory condition or felt problem that needs a solution, thus the need for the study. So usually when you have your defense of your research paper, you would be asked by your panel members, okay, why is there a need to conduct this study? What problem or problems does or do your study seek to answer or address? So you have to bear that in mind. Okay, next is that the purpose of the study. So in the purpose of the study, it briefly states that the researcher proposes to, or what the researcher proposes to investigate. So the purpose should be concise statement providing a framework for the entire study. So for the justification of the study, the researchers must make clear why this particular subject is important actually to investigate. So you must present an argument for the worth or value of your study. Next, researchers should also tell the reader the reasons for wanting to investigate the problem, which includes a short discussion of why this study is important to you and what is gained from your study. Okay, and lastly, you end the background of your study with a sentence or two that would show the link between the background of the study and of course the problem. So remember that the background of the study is important because it is usually what the reader browses whenever presented with a paper. So it should be written in a way that it will capture the interest of the reader and would make him or her continue reading through the entire paper. So proper documentation of course, borrowed ideas, okay, and concepts should be done following the APA style of referencing, okay, or your parenthetical notation. But in our case, we will be using the APA format of UC in the meantime. All right, next. Moving on, we have the theoretical or conceptual framework. So this section basically contains theories and models that provide the conceptual underpinning of the study or the legitimate basis for defining its parameters. So this section is important because the theories shall help you when you get to analyze and interpret the findings of your research. So how do you put together the theoretical framework then? You will have to go through existing literature in order to acquaint yourself with the available body of knowledge related to the study. So you have to review literature. It might be time consuming, it might be intimidating and frustrating, but as you start reading the literature, you will soon discern that the problem you wish to investigate has its roots in a number of theories that have been developed from different perspectives. Now, let's differentiate between a theoretical framework and a conceptual framework. So, a theoretical framework is the theoretical explanation of the phenomenon or the problem being studied. It could be a single theory or a compilation of theories upon which your paper is based. But in the absence of formal or academic theories, okay, concepts can be used in which case of conceptual framework is actually adopted. So a conceptual framework simply shows the relationship between the variables included in your study. Okay, so more on the theoretical framework and theories. A theory can be defined as the explanation of observed regularities. It provides formal, logical explanation of or explanations of some phenomenon through describing how things correspond to the phenomenon and how they relate to each other. So theories are those generalizations that help us better understand reality and show, or it allows us to identify the logic behind the things we actually observe. Okay, next. Whether you use whether you use a theoretical framework or conceptual framework, the use of variables and interrelationship of variables as treated in the study have to be depicted or illustrated to serve as the researcher's roadmap. And this is what we call the paradigm or the paradigm of the study. Okay, so the research paradigm is actually a diagrammatic representation of a conceptual framework. So it shows in a more vivid way what the conceptual framework wants to convey. So the research paradigm requires a clear discussion of the variables and their relationships. So we will use, okay, the research format of the research paradigm in UC, which is the IPOO model, okay, which stands for input, process, output, and your expected outcome. So in the input, it consists of the data flowing into the system, which is usually the statement of the problem. So the process here refers to the action of manipulating the input into a more useful form. So this coincides with your chapter 2 of your paper. So the output is the information flowing out of the system, and this would now match your chapter 3. And of course, the expected outcome would refer to the recommendation of your study, which is seen in your chapter 2. All right, so let us now move on to the statement of the problem. So please note that you should write the main problem or the general problem in a declarative form. So a declarative sentence, also known as your statement, okay, makes a statement and end with a period. Okay, the main problem, okay, should state the intent of the investigation in a clear grammatical sequence. It shows congruence with the title and the theoretical framework, and provides linkage with the methodology to be employed. So for your specific problems or sub-problems, they should be written in form of interrogative statements, or statements. Each specific problem will be followed immediately by its hypothesis. If there is a need for a hypothesis, then, okay, when we say interrogative, your sentences should end with question mark instead of a period. Okay? All right. So let's proceed with the review of literature. So, according to John Cowick's, okay, uh, there is a little point in reinventing the wheel. The work that you do is not done in a vacuum, but builds on the ideas of other people who have studied the field before you. So this requires you to describe what has been published and to marshal information in a relevant and critical way. So the work that you do is not done in a vacuum, meaning to say, okay, you will use other people's idea, okay, to also create your paper. Therefore, it is imperative that when you quote or when you write other people's idea, you have to acknowledge their work or acknowledge the source where you got that idea. Okay? So, one way of recognizing your related literature is through a relevance tree, as it shows here in our slide. So the example of this slide is for the research question: is there a link between benchmarking and total quality management? You can identify keywords and phrases. So in this example, this researcher can now focus on studies or research already done on benchmarking, TQM, and then of course link benchmarking and TQM. If we further look into benchmarking, this research wrote down or identified the following topics that can further look for: benchmarking theory and of course benchmarking practice. Okay, so imagine that your paper will be an hourglass. You will construct in such a way for your themes are the broadest at the top and of course the bottom, like the introduction and the discussion. The introduction should begin by placing the work you will present in a broad context. From this point, you focus more narrowly on issues closer to your experiment or your study until you end the introduction with a brief statement of the specific questions you are attempting to answer. Of course, that is your thesis or your research statement. So from the general, okay, that's your secondary research. It includes the review and critique, okay, broad area of interest and propose solutions to identified problems. And then to specific, that's your primary research, okay, to test out or prove your proposed solution using specific studies, surveys, or experiments, and then define the nature of your test, which are applied to a typical example of a broader area. In what ways are they atypical? Okay, and then again, it will go back to the general. This is now where you put your work in context. You explorate your study or your findings back to the general case. And this is basically very important. Okay, so I will end our introductory chapter here. Thank you very much for listening.